Story 1. If you missed a TV show, too bad. You will have to hope it is on again one day. Everyone watching shows at the same time was great for talking about them at work the next day. Story 2. The idea of arranging to meet someone and then having no contact until you met was strange. I cannot imagine meeting someone in town or at a restaurant without messages to fall back on. You simply waited. If they were running late, they could not tell you. There was no way to check that you were at the right coffee shop. You made a plan and turned up. Story 3. Order items from a catalog by mail. Tear out the order card, fill it out with the items and your credit card information or include a check. Mail it in, and wait 2 weeks to receive your JCPenney turtleneck sweaters. Story 4. A friend knocked on their door unannounced because they happened to be in the neighborhood. Story 5. This is how engineering drawings were done. No AutoCAD or similar software. Pick up scales and pencils, lie down on massive paper, and draw. Story 6. Looking through the yellow pages to decide which pizza to order tonight. Story 7. The other day I was explaining to my kids what it was like to go to the movies and how I would look up movie times in the newspaper or call directory assistants. It blew their minds. Story 8. To hear a song again, you had to rewind the tape and guess when it was positioned correctly because there was no way to tell. Story 9. You had to use a book to look things up. If you did not have the right one, you had to go to the library. Story 10. The disappearing concept of waiting for everything. Waiting for a movie to be released on video home system and for a copy to be available to rent, standing in line for concert or movie tickets, waiting for the next episode of your favorite television show, waiting for the internet to load or for phone use when someone else is connected to the internet, and so on. Story 11. Hear me out. Sitting in the car and watching raindrops slide down the window is the most stimulation you are going to get on a long car ride. Laughing out loud. Story 12. We used to be happy when the phone rang. Now when it rings, we are like, fuck, can they not text this? Story 13. There were only 5 television channels and you had to get up to change the channel. Story 14. Waiting for the internet to connect and being unable to use the phone at the same time. Story 15. Using a dictionary and going to the library to research a topic for a paper, they would lose it in a second. Story 16. I remember getting exam results in person. I had to walk into the university and read a list pinned to a notice board to see my final result. There was nothing like standing with all your classmates, scanning the list to discover who had achieved a first and who had failed. You also did not know in advance if your lecturer would be absent due to sickness. You had to show up regardless, and you could only leave after 10 minutes past the scheduled start time. Story 17. There used to be full-service gas stations with attendants who would wash your windshield and check your oil when you asked. Story 18. True story. Many years ago, I babysat my 3-year-old goddaughter and planned a fun day for the 2 of us. We went to the park, had pizza for lunch, and I gave her $10, which she spent with a blast at the 99-cent store. When she grew tired, we went to my home. She asked to lie down and to watch the television in my bedroom. It was a small black and white set that I used to watch in the morning while I got ready for work, mostly for the news and weather. I switched it on and found something for her to watch. She stared at the set for a moment, slid to the edge of the bed, walked over to the television, hit the side with her hand and then said to me, "It's broken." I nearly died laughing. This little girl had only seen color sets and had never seen a black and white set before. Story 19. Being charged per text message and per minute of phone calls. Story 20. Here, wrap this aluminum foil around those rabbit ears so I can watch the nightly news. Story 21. Physical paperwork stored in filing cabinets requires searching through endless files to find what you need. Documents can be destroyed by fire or lost, leaving no record of purchases, contracts, or agreements. Story 22. I'm not too old, but my kids were flabbergasted that we couldn't skip our advertisements when we watched television. Story 23. You woke up, ate breakfast, and were sent out of the house until lunchtime. After lunch, you were sent out again until dinner time. Your parents were not going to watch over you the entire time. Once you were a teenager, you and a couple of friends could hang out in the living room. With cool parents, you could hang out in the bedroom with the door open. You were expected to entertain yourself and use your imagination. Even older millennials who had computers and video games were expected to go outside and socialize for most of the day. Story 24. When I used a slide rule, my daughter could not believe that calculators did not exist during my lifetime. Story 25. Hardly anything had a tutorial. Makeup and hair, fixing your toilet, learning to draw, cooking, even sports. It was hard to find someone skilled in those areas. Story 26. In the 1990s, there were no services like Google Maps, Waze, or similar navigation apps. You had to know the neighborhood, buy a paper map, or log in to MapQuest and print directions. You could buy a Garmin GPS device, but those were very expensive at the time. Story 27. You could smoke in hospitals, waiting areas, nurses' break rooms, and patient rooms. Everyone smoked. Story 28. A reel-to-reel tape recorder. Even when I was gifted one in the 1980s, I had to have the previous owner show me how to use it. It's not just loading the tape, the transport controls are completely different too. Story 29. Driving somewhere without a phone or the global positioning system, using only a paper map. Story 30. Remembering phone numbers and the correct speed dial numbers. Story 31. I was teaching my students year 10 in the United Kingdom, equivalent to 9th grade in the United States, about different types of computer storage. I had some examples of older magnetic storage media, including an old video home system cassette I had dug out. They could not get their heads around it. The concept of rewinding it, why it was so big and bulky, and whether it could record television in color confused them. When I showed them how to flip up the protective cover so they could see the tape inside, they almost lost their minds. This was on Wednesday this week. Story 32. Party line phones. There is nothing like picking up the phone and finding a neighbor using it. You have to wait or tell them you need to make an emergency call because there was no 911. Story 33. Using a 8 kilobits per second internet connection. Can you imagine children waiting an entire minute to view a meme? Story 34. Showering naked after physical education class at school or at the gym in front of friends, peers, or total strangers. Story 35. You knew all your friends' home phone numbers by memory. The whole house would ring when someone called, and before caller identification you often had to speak to a parent before reaching the person you wanted. Story 36. They probably think a mimeograph machine is kind of neat. Story 37. Knowledge was stored in the brain because we didn't have Google. Story 38. Off the top of my head, I could tell you my phone number, several relatives' phone numbers, and maybe 10 friends' numbers. Story 39. A book delivered to your house listing everyone's name, address, and phone number. You had to pay extra to be unlisted. It was called the phone book. Story 40. Using prepaid cards to make phone calls and paying for minutes. Story 41. When I was in college, every student's test and quiz grades were posted on the classroom door with their name and student identification number. That identification number was our social security number. Story 42. Rotary phones and phone numbers that start with letters rather than numbers. Story 43. Passing notes in class because cell phones were not a thing. Story 44. Going to the cinema, knowing you would never be able to see that movie again. Story 45. Magazines such as Reader's Digest. I have heard people say they do not know what we used to do in waiting rooms before smartphones. Story 46. Working 9 to 5 in a regular middle-class job and being able to afford a house, a car, and a vacation each year, perhaps with a partner who does not work. Story 47. Counter checks were common. Stores kept checkbooks on the counter at the register. You filled one out with your name and address, and the store accepted it. In small towns with only a couple of banks, most people knew each other. This practice was common until the mid-1960s. Story 48. I was going to say life without the internet, but that is too easy. Think instead of life before transistors and everything they enable. I do not expect most people, especially young people, to realize how much of our daily life involves interacting with or depending on devices and systems that are only possible because of transistors. Story 49. I had to wait until 9 in the evening to make phone calls because that is when long-distance rates dropped. If someone called while I was online, I would lose my internet connection and have to start downloading that 5 megabyte file all over again. Story 50. Existence without the dopamine hits that TikTok and other doom-scrolling platforms provide. Story 51. Insert a cassette into your personal computer and play it silently to load the game, then start playing. Story 52. Biking all the way to a friend's house just to find out nobody's home. Story 53. When I was a kid in Central Texas, my mom used to leave me in my car seat while she went into the store or the post office. People would walk by, sometimes even wave at me. Usually she cracked a window, but not always. Story 54. A mechanical typewriter. Go ahead. Rage type without using the backspace key. I will watch. Story 55. Those old copies rub blue ink on you if you used them too soon after the copy was made. Story 56. Having to actually read using dictionaries, phone books, maps, encyclopedias, and so on. Story 57. Writing letters to communicate with people who are far away. Story 58. Getting yelled at by your sibling for not rewinding the video home system tape after watching a movie. Story 59. Everyone who had a phone used to receive a book from the phone company once a year containing the phone numbers and addresses of everyone. You had to pay to opt out, but most people were fine with their first and last name, phone number, and address being available to all other phone users in their town or city. Story 60. I remember going to Blockbuster or Hollywood Video on a Friday night to rent a movie. We usually did one quick pass through the new release section because they only had so many copies of each title. After that, we walked the aisles again looking for whatever was left. The new movie you wanted was almost always already checked out. I remember the distinct sound of people dropping off movies in the return slot and asking the employee to check the returns for the title we were seeking. I spent what felt like an hour walking around with my dad while my mom waited in the car. Now I spend that same time scrolling through streaming services searching for something to watch. Story 61. Downloading a 1 megabyte file was an overnight affair. And that's assuming it wasn't corrupted or someone picked up the phone and killed the connection. Story 62. Waiting for the modem and router to connect to the internet. Static and interference are audible. Story 63. I was on the toilet when the phone rang and couldn't answer. There is no answering machine, voicemail, or text notification, so I don't know who called. Story 64. Being locked into a television network schedule instead of being able to binge watch my favorite shows felt restrictive. Looking back, I am not even sure how I coped with it. Story 65. Now that I am officially old, I would like to add that I miss not knowing the title of a song on the radio and trying to figure it out by waiting for it to play again or by singing it to my friends. Story 66. You could order a pizza by talking to someone on the phone. That person would get into a car and deliver it to a house they had never visited, in the dark, without the assistance of the global positioning system, all within 30 minutes. Story 67. Do teenagers today know how to operate a rotary telephone? Story 68. Often you did not know things or could not get what you wanted. For most of my teenage years, I really wanted to watch Spaceballs after a friend caught it on late-night television and told me about it at school the next day. We had a local video shop, but they did not have it in stock and could not source a copy. I could not go online to look it up because the internet did not exist. It was the same with song lyrics. There were many arguments about the correct words. If an album did not have liner notes, you had to guess. When the internet arrived and you could find things by typing into a computer, it felt genuinely magical. The idea of carrying that power in your pocket would have blown my mind. Story 69. Dial-up internet meant waiting 5 minutes for one blurry image to load and being disconnected whenever someone picked up the home phone. Story 70. My first car was so fancy it had a trunk-mounted changer that held 6 compact discs. You would open the trunk, eject the disc holder, load not 1 but 6 compact discs, and listen to them to your heart's content. Those 6 discs were Matchbox 20, Jewel, Chumbawamba, The Verve Pipe, Bare Naked Ladies, and The Wallflowers. Sometimes Tom Petty's greatest hits made it in there too. Story 71. I balanced a checkbook in home economics in 2011. My teacher swore we would still need it in the future. I did not understand it then, and I would not wish it on anyone. Story 72. I cannot believe that no one has said manual transmission yet. Story 73. I was making popcorn in a pan on the stove. My nephew's head exploded when he saw me in the kitchen shaking the pan. I was laughing out loud. Story 74. Many comments here are about not having a phone for stimulation. However, having to navigate with a Thomas guide or a paper map would be a real problem. Many younger people would struggle to comprehend spatial information and to navigate. Story 75. Printing out MapQuest directions and hoping you didn't miss the turn. Story 76. I grew up in a house with no mains water and no electricity. Eventually my dad installed a generator, a big single-cylinder diesel that started automatically when the first load was switched on. I remember switching on a light and it would start dim, then get brighter, pulsing with the engine cycles. My mother was over the moon because she could have a washing machine. We kids were thrilled to have a TV. We collected rainwater, and my dad brought a container of fresh drinking water from work every day. The toilet was a chemical one. Looking back, it was a primitive existence. The house was wooden and almost on the beach. During a gale, the wind would make the carpets ripple. At storm high tide, we could hear the water rushing under the house. Story 77. A rotary phone. If you miss a number, you must clear the line and dial again, waiting for the dial to reset each time. Story 78. Working on a farm in the United Kingdom in the 1970s, the fertilizer delivery lorry would arrive with 5 tons of fertilizer in blue plastic bags. Each bag weighed 100 weight, that is 112 pounds or approximately 50 kilograms. There was no forklift attachment on the tractor, so each bag was unloaded manually by sliding it from the side of the flatbed lorry onto the shoulder and carrying it a few feet or yards to where it was to be stored, sometimes up uneven steps into an old barn. That was 210 bags. Some larger farms organized their entire annual fertilizer usage to be delivered the same day or week. After the delivery, the workers had to catch up with normal farm tasks, or the farmer would have something to say. Nowadays, there is a 25-kilogram maximum weight limit for a person to carry, and even the smallest farms have mechanical forklifts. Story 79. If you called someone and they didn't pick up, that was the end of it. You would try them again hours later or the next day. We never assumed our friends or loved ones were injured or dead. We were just like, man, I haven't been able to get a hold of Bob in 3 days. That dirtbag. Story 80. There was a lot of actual waiting, movie releases, downloads, getting pictures developed, and getting on the internet. Nothing was instant. Story 81. Even worse than having no cell phones would be party lines shared by several neighbors, where you had to wait for the chatty person to finish before you could make a call. Story 82. People received information and advice from experts, not from TikTok. Story 83. I have to write a book report, and the only real option is to read the book. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.